Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really unpack the core insights from important sources, giving you a quick way to get informed. Today, we're focusing on something I think touches pretty much everyone: self-compassion. Our main guide for this is the Self-Compassion Workbook Practical Exercises to Approach Your Thoughts, Emotions, and Actions with Kindness. It's by Joy Johnston, who's a licensed clinical social worker. And our mission really is to give you a shortcut, a way to understand what self-compassion is, why it's surprisingly beneficial, and crucially, how you can actually start using it in your daily life for, real change.
Yeah, and I think what's really fundamental about self-compassion, maybe what makes it different from, say, self-esteem or just trying to think positively, is where it starts. It really begins by meeting yourself exactly where you are,
Yeah.
right now, no judgment. And that feels like the essential first step for, well, for any real healing or lasting change.
That's a great way to put it, a perfect springboard. So, okay, let's unpack this. For someone trying to get their head around it, how does the workbook define self-compassion, like in simple terms?
Johnson puts it pretty simply. It's basically talking to and treating yourself with the same sort of kindness, understanding, and reassurance you'd automatically give to a close friend. Someone you care about who's struggling or maybe made a mistake. It's turning that compassion you have for others inward.
It's funny you say that because we do often do that naturally for others, don't we? Like, imagine a coworker, a friend at work, comes to you totally beside themselves because they forgot half their presentation slides. You wouldn't just tear into them, right? Tell them
Yeah,
they're
of course
useless.
not.
You'd offer support, probably say, it's okay, we can figure it out. But as the workbook points out, our own internal monologue, often it's exactly that harsh, critical voice. It's kind of a jarring contrast when you think about it.
Definitely. And if you connect that to the sort of bigger picture, the benefits are just huge. Because self-compassion creates space. It literally gives you room to breathe, room to build a life that feels aligned with your values.
Mm.
Not just constantly chasing external approval. It's this incredibly powerful tool for like internal healing. It reduces that really deep-seated self-criticism so many of us walk around with. And often it's the first step towards finding the courage to even figure out what you need, let alone ask for it.
Right. The workbook digs into these core elements: mindfulness, self-acceptance, grounding in values, and loving kindness. We touched on values, like that dependability example,
Mhm.
how maybe saying no helps you be more dependable overall because you're focusing your energy. Can you maybe quickly explain how mindfulness and self-acceptance fit in? What makes them unique parts of this?
Absolutely. So mindfulness in the context of self-compassion isn't about, emptying your mind or reaching some Zen state. It's much more about just being present with whatever's happening inside, your thoughts, your difficult feelings, just noticing them without that layer of judgment.
Yeah. Okay.
And self-acceptance. Well, it's different from just giving up or being complacent. It's about acknowledging your full humanity, flaws, mistakes, everything as the starting point. It's like saying, okay, this is where I am right now, and that's fundamentally okay. Together, those two things, mindfulness and acceptance, they create the inner space you need to then respond with kindness rather than just reacting.
That makes sense. Observing, not immediately judging. Okay, so with that foundation laid, let's tackle something tricky: our thoughts, especially that inner critic that just seems relentless sometimes. How does self-compassion help us deal with, I don't know, the thousands of automatic thoughts we have every day, many of which can be pretty harsh?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. A key insight here is understanding thoughts versus reality.
Mm.
Our brains have this tendency to fuse with critical thoughts. We just accept them as pure fact. But they're just thoughts, mental events. The workbook uses the story of Keisha. Remember her? She forgot a birthday gift for a friend.
Right.
Her immediate thought was, I'm such a bad friend. And even when her friend was like, no worries, it's fine, Keisha couldn't shake it. She thought her friend was just being nice.
So she was fused with that thought.
Totally fused. And this fusion traps us. It leads to things like emotional reasoning. I feel guilty, so I must be a bad person. Or that all or nothing thinking, I messed up this one thing, so I'm a total failure. It creates this painful downward spiral, which really brings up the question, okay, how do we get some distance from these thoughts when they feel so real?
Yeah, exactly. The million-dollar question. The workbook has some really practical exercises for this to help us defuse. One is just called taking note of your inner critic. It's not about fighting it, but just acknowledging it, understanding its usual messages. Because trying to ignore it, sweep it under the rug, that often just gives it more power, right?
Absolutely. That simple act of noticing, there's that critical thought again. Instead of wrestling with it, that's often the first step. It's like turning on the light.
Exactly. And there's another really vivid one, the fusing with the critic exercise. You
Mm.
literally imagine holding a piece of paper with your critical thoughts written on it right up against your face. You
Oh.
can't see anything else, your whole view is blocked. Then the exercise guides you to slowly move the paper away, further and further. That simple action, it's such a great metaphor for gaining perspective. Seeing the thoughts as thoughts, not your entire reality.
Yeah, it creates distance. And building on that, there's the idea of facts versus judgments.
Yeah.
It's super effective. So many thoughts we treat as solid facts are actually just opinions, subjective judgments.
Like I'm a bad friend. That's a judgment, not a provable fact.
Exactly. Recognizing that difference, is this a fact or is this my mind's opinion, that helps you diffuse. It takes away some of its power to define you.
Okay. And something that really hits home for me, and probably a lot of listeners, is the whole shooting on yourself thing. I should have known better. I shouldn't feel this way. The workbook connects this so strongly to perfectionism.
Oh, definitely.
It teaches you to spot those restrictive shoulds and then rewrite them based on your actual values. It feels much more realistic, more compassionate. Those shoulds create so much pressure.
They really do. They're like little tyrants in our heads. And to counter that, the workbook introduces thoughts of loving kindness. This is a really beautiful practice. You imagine someone, or maybe even a being, who loves you unconditionally. Could be a real person, a grandparent, a spiritual figure, maybe even a future, wiser version of yourself. You let yourself really feel their kindness, their comfort. And then you turn that same feeling towards your own difficult thoughts. You might silently repeat phrases like, may you hold your thoughts lightly. May you let them pass by. May you accept yourself completely.
The book tells Sarah's story, the woman with flight anxiety. Her self-talk was brutal. I'm so ridiculous. Why am I so weak? Which just made the anxiety worse, obvious.
Right. It added another layer of suffering.
But then her cousin Ross was compassionate. He said something like, hey, tons of people get anxious flying, me included. Just breathe and be kind to yourself. And that external compassion helped her shift internally towards being kinder to herself and finding useful strategies. It shows how powerful that shift can be. So we've seen how kindness towards our thoughts works. But thoughts are one thing. What about emotions? Those, really sticky, powerful feelings. How does self-compassion help us handle those? The book says we often try to just ignore them or push them down, which paradoxically makes them stick around longer.
That's spot on. A really key piece here is learning to separate feelings from facts. Our body's natural fight-or-flight response can make intense emotions feel dangerous, like a threat we need to eliminate.
Yeah.
But actually accepting the emotion, allowing it to be there without immediately trying to fix it or judge it, that opens up space to understand what it's about. Self-compassion helps you become an ally to yourself in those tough emotional moments instead of another enemy piling on. Think about Greg, the guy with social anxiety in the workbook.
Right.
His self-criticism was intense. I'm just being stupid, acting like a baby. When his wife tried to offer support, he got angry because his inner critic twisted her kindness into proof that he was weak and needed coddling. So he ended up feeling more ashamed, pushing her away. Self-compassion would have let him say, okay, I'm feeling really anxious right now. That's tough. How can I support myself? Big difference.
That ally versus enemy framing is really helpful. So what are the practical steps the workbook gives us for bringing compassion to our emotions?
Well, the very first step is simply giving yourself permission to feel. Just allowing the emotion to be there without that instant judgment. And maybe noticing your patterns, like, do you shut down? Do you lash out? Just observing.
Okay, just letting it be there first.
Exactly. Then shifting to see emotions as information instead of threats, viewing them as data, getting curious. What is this feeling telling me? And this leads to a really powerful reframe, especially around anger. Seeing anger as a secondary emotion.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Secondary, what does that mean?
It's this idea that anger often acts like a bodyguard. It shows up looking tough, but it's usually protecting something more vulnerable underneath.
Like fear or hurt.
Exactly. Fear, hurt, disappointment, feeling rejected, feeling unseen. Anger rushes in to protect those tender spots. So instead of just reacting to the anger, self-compassion lets you ask, okay, anger's here. What might be underneath this? What vulnerable part of me is feeling threatened right now? It helps you get to the root need rather than just getting stuck in the anger itself. It's transformative.
Wow, okay. That shifts things quite a bit.
Yeah.
So once we understand that, maybe we see the fear under the anger, how do we actually feel safe enough to sit with these emotions rather than just getting swept away?
Great question. The workbook offers some really practical body-based ways to create that sense of safety. One is the breathe into it exercise. It's a simple breathing technique, not necessarily to force relaxation, but just to slow things down and observe the emotion without judgment, just riding the wave with your breath. Then there's the body scan. This is about noticing where you physically feel the emotion.
Yeah.
Like, is your stomach tight with anxiety? Is your jaw clenched in anger? It builds that mind-body awareness.
And you mentioned touch earlier. Does the workbook bring that in for emotions too?
Yes, absolutely. Self-soothing touch is surprisingly powerful. There's actual science behind it. Comforting touch, even your own, releases oxytocin, that tend and befriend hormone.
Ah, right.
So the book suggests things like placing a hand over your heart, gently clasping your hands, or even giving yourself a little hug, whatever feels genuinely comforting to you. Think about Sam at work, smelling the casserole that reminded her of her mom and tearing up.
Yeah.
Or Curtis, the nurse, crying in the bathroom after a stressful shift. Their first instinct might be self-criticism. Get it together. Stop being weak. Self-compassion allows for that moment of soothing touch, a kind word internally, a deep breath. It acknowledges the pain instead of adding another layer of judgment.
It makes so much sense, allowing that moment of grace. The book wraps this up nicely with a self-compassion mantra for emotions, right?
It does. It's a great way to integrate these ideas. May I give myself permission to feel. May I thank my emotions and body for giving me the information I need. May I accept myself as I am.
That's a lovely way to bring it all together in practice. Okay, so we've journeyed through thoughts, through emotions. Now let's talk about action, our behavior in the world. What happens when we really mess up? Make a big mistake, maybe hurt someone unintentionally. How does self-compassion apply then?
This is where loving you in practice really comes in. Self-compassion totally changes how you deal with mistakes. Instead of that internal battle where the critic screams, "You did a terrible thing. You are a terrible person."
Yeah, that familiar downward spiral.
Right. Self-compassion approaches it like a supportive partner and says, wow, okay, this is really difficult. You acted in a way that doesn't feel right, that isn't aligned with who you want to be. What support do you need right now to handle this, to make amends, to learn from this, and to act differently next time? It's about support and learning, not condemnation.
But what about that inner critic? It feels like for a lot of us, it doesn't just disappear when we make a mistake. It gets louder. Can we ever really silence it?
You know, the realistic answer from the workbook is probably not completely. Those critical thoughts might still pop up, especially under stress, but you build resilience to it. Johnson suggests the key is meeting the critic with compassion, too. Recognizing it's probably trying to protect you in some weird, misguided way. And then gently, firmly, taking back control. You can literally say to it internally, hey, I hear you. I know you're trying to keep me safe, maybe from messing up again, thanks for the input. But I've got this now. I'll handle it from here.
Then you consciously choose that more compassionate response you've been practicing.
That's a really empowering image, taking the reins back. But I can hear some listeners thinking, okay, be kind to myself after I messed up. Isn't that just letting myself off the hook? Isn't that self-indulgence? How does the book tackle that? That is such a common and important concern. The workbook uses this fantastic analogy, who's the boss? Think about having a really critical, demanding boss. How do you feel? Probably anxious, motivated by fear. Maybe your confidence plummets, right? You just try not to get yelled at.
Totally. Been there.
Now imagine a compassionate boss. Someone who supports you, sees your potential, holds you accountable, but with respect. You probably feel more confident, intrinsically motivated, maybe even enjoy your work more.
Right. Worlds apart.
Well, self-compassion is like being that compassionate boss to yourself. What's fascinating is the research shows this approach actually leads to more motivation, more accountability, more willingness to learn from mistakes compared to fear-based self-criticism, which often just makes us shut down or hide.
Yeah.
Julian's story in the book is a powerful example. He grew up with really critical parents, and his inner critic just echoed them, making him feel weak for struggling to connect with them as an adult. Self-compassion helped him see that his hesitation wasn't weakness. It was actually about setting necessary boundaries for his own well-being. It allowed him to become his own ally, to heal some of that old pain and find a healthier way forward.
That's a huge distinction. Self-compassion actually fuels positive action. It doesn't excuse inaction. That ties perfectly into the idea of focusing on values over perfection. The
Good.
world's unpredictable, right? Trying to be perfect is exhausting and impossible. The book suggests focusing on your core personal values gives you a much more flexible compass.
Exactly.
It allows for mistakes, for detours, twists, turns, and off-roading, as the book puts it, without totally derailing you because you're guided by what truly matters to you, not some impossible external standard. It encourages you, the listener, to really think about what are your core values and how can they guide you away from the critic's demands.
And living by your values naturally leads to meeting your needs with compassion.
Mhm.
That inner critic is so sneaky, often telling us that taking care of ourselves, getting enough rest, asking for help, setting boundaries is selfish.
Oh yeah, the selfish label.
Right. Which leads straight to burnout, resentment, and just reacting poorly to things. Self-compassion helps you recognize your fundamental needs, physical, emotional, relational, as valid and important. Meeting those needs allows you to show up in your life more fully, more thoughtfully, instead of running on empty.
The book also offers a really simple, accessible practice. Tune in with the senses. It's about consciously using your senses to bring in comfort and mindfulness throughout the day. Like really savoring the smell of your morning coffee, noticing the warmth,
Hmm.
or listening to a piece of music you love, feeling the texture of a soft blanket. Small moments of intentional, comforting sensory input. It's a great way to ground yourself.
And one more creative exercise the workbook suggests is actually drawing your inner critic.
Hmm.
Visualizing it, giving it a form, can help you understand it better. What does it look like? What seems to be its motivation, its fears?
That sounds kind of fun, actually.
It can be. It helps you relate to it with a bit more perspective, maybe even empathy, rather than just being overwhelmed by its voice. Cynthia's story about body image really brings this home. She was stuck in that awful cycle of criticizing her weight, trying harsh diets, failing, criticizing herself more.
A very common struggle.
Very. But by shifting her focus away from the critic's demand for a perfect body and towards her value of nourishment and well-being, she started building sustainable, compassionate habits around food and movement. It became about caring for herself, not punishing herself.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. The concepts, the thoughts, the emotions, the actions. Now, the big question. How do we keep this going? What's the long view on this self-compassion journey? The workbook is clear. This isn't like a project you finish and tick off a list. It's a practice.
That is so, so crucial to grasp. The long-term perspective is key. The workbook shares some vital insights here. First, growth isn't linear. Expect setbacks, plateaus, loops, not a smooth upward climb. That's normal.
Good reminder. Second, progress is often easier to see looking back over time. Those small daily practices really do add up over months and years, even if it doesn't feel like much day to day. Third, it is always okay to go back to the basics. Always. If you fall off track, the foundation is still there. You can always just gently start again. No need for judgment about stopping.
Like hitting a reset button.
Exactly. Fourth, the onion analogy. As you practice, you might uncover deeper layers of difficulty or pain. That can feel discouraging, but it's actually a sign of progress. It means you've worked through the outer layers that were protecting or masking that deeper stuff. Fifth, and this trips people up, don't criticize your criticism. As you get better at noticing your thoughts, you might actually hear your inner critic more often at first.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, have compassion for that increased awareness. You're just noticing it more as you build new tools. It doesn't mean you're failing. And finally, maybe most importantly, the real practice is in the doing. Reading about it is great, but the transformation happens when you actively try to bring compassion into your actual lived moments. So practically, it sounds like the advice is, weave these practices into your routine somehow. Don't wait for a major crisis. Use them for the small stuff, spilling coffee, feeling annoyed in traffic. And remember, there's no single right way to do it, just the willingness to try, again and again.
Precisely. And don't forget to reach out. If things feel really stuck, or if uncovering those deeper layers feels overwhelming or brings up past trauma, please connect with support. Trusted friends, family, or seriously, consider finding a therapist or counselor trained in these approaches. You absolutely do not have to navigate the hardest parts alone.
That's such an important point. Ultimately, what comes through so clearly is that self-compassion isn't some innate trait you either have or don't. It's a skill. It's a practice anyone can learn and cultivate. All it really takes is that willingness to try and to take that next compassionate step, especially when things are tough. It really is about shifting from being your own worst critic to becoming your own supportive ally.
So maybe as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something for you to think about. What's one single act of self-compassion you've maybe been putting off? Something you might have dismissed as, I don't know, selfish or too indulgent. What might happen if you deliberately offered yourself that specific kindness this week? Not as an indulgence, but understanding how it might actually connect to your deeper values and maybe bring you just a little bit closer to living that more wholehearted life you want.